Well, good morning. This is Talking with Gil Mathew here, and today we're talking with Hilary Hedman. Welcome, Hilary.
Good morning.
Great to have you here. You know, you and I have talked over the years, and you've told some wonderful stories that I'd like you to relate, and I'd like to put a wonderful title on it called Treasures of Earth, but I think maybe the real title might be just Holes in the Ground. Now, what would I be referring to there?
Well, I think I piqued your interest some time back when we were talking about growing up in Union Hill area, and in the 50s, when I was like 7, 8, 9 years old, the mines were still sort of running. They were in the process of shutting down, and there was still lots of glory holes, coyote holes, some people would call them, mine shafts, all around on the hillsides, and they were pretty much open for any young person to explore and get away from your parents and do things that like young men will do. And we had one that I think really caught your interest. It was called we called it the He-Man Woman Haters Club Cave. And right now it's still available to those people that know of its existence. It's on the Empire Mine property, and we kept the entrance hidden. And I was there a few years ago, just giving a quick look at it, and it hasn't been covered up or dynamited or concreted over or metal gates put on it or anything. You can still go in it.
How did you happen to originally find it?
Well, growing up in Union Hill in the 50s, it was kind of insulated. It was had its own little grocery store and the school, and it was like a separate little neighborhood. And it turns out that kids from other generations before me knew of this place, and it kind of got passed down as a kid's secret. From generation to generation. I have no idea how old it is. It probably goes back to the 1800s, would be my guess. So anyways, reached a certain age, and if you qualified for some reason, older kids would share its existence with the younger ones, and you go through kind of a initiation ceremony where you poke your finger with something sharp like a tip of a knife or something and do a blood brother initiation where you rub the blood together and promise not to tell anybody where the location of this club. Instead of a clubhouse, it was a club cave. And then as you got older, you'd pass the knowledge on to younger kids, and as you get interested in cars and sports and things like that, and your interests change, it got passed on down.
Fascinating. It must have been very interesting to have grown up around the Empire Mine back in the middle 50s. Did you actually see the mines in operation?
They were in a process of removing some of the high grade. If you've ever been to the park headquarters for the Empire Mine, there's a room there that used to be like a secret room. All the windows were all blacked out, and they had a model made from, it looked like welding rod wire that showed all the workings of the mine, hundreds of miles underground, and they were color-coded to show the value of the gold ore that could be removed from each one of those areas. So what I understood was when they went to shut the mines down, they started at the bottom levels, removing as much easy-to-find gold as they could, and then as they went farther towards the surface, they'd turn the pumps off and let that portion of the mine flood. And then they brought out valuable equipment while they were doing that, pumps, motors, hoists, mine cars, all that sort of thing, and they put it out in the yard. And then they would later on put it up for sale at auction and got sold to active mines like in Nevada, and I think even some of the major equipment like the cyanide tanks and that sort of thing were disassembled and shipped to South America. So while the mines were running, they were removing some ore, high value, and then removing valuable equipment, getting staged to sell it before they finally shut the last pump off, and the mines were flooded for eternity, I guess, unless the Idaho-Maryland reopens. Then who knows?
Yeah, that's another story for a talking with for another day. Must have been fascinating as a young kid growing up here with all of that adventure available to you. And so, how many members did you have in the Women Haters Club?
I think there was probably like maybe 6 or 8 of us, and not everybody was into going into an old mine shaft, so that kind of whittled it down a little bit. And then you had to make a contribution to be a member too, and that would include things like firecrackers, boxed matches, cigarettes, sort of contraband that you could steal from your parents and bring into the mine and share with your comrades.
How far back into the mountain would one of these shafts go that you would explore?
The one that we had tables and chairs and candles all along the walls of the cave were probably about 150 feet back in there. It was actually bifurcated. There was one side tunnel that went back in about maybe 50 more feet, and then the main tunnel. And it was unlike some other glory holes like that around. At least this one was, the miners made it fairly tall so you could walk upright in it. Some of them that we knew of, you had to get down on your hands and knees and crawl around. This one was more friendly, less likely to bump your head once you got through the tight little opening.
So you actually had tables, chairs, and candles?
Oh yeah, we'd have meetings in there. I'd make it as comfortable as possible.
Yeah, can you imagine what you could do today with the technology back there?
Well, it was pretty low tech. All the floors, the walls, the ceiling of the adit, they'd call it, is covered with pick marks. So there probably was some dynamite or blasting powder involved in boring it originally, but it was a lot of handwork. So that was like pick and shovel and probably a wheelbarrow. I don't think there was any signs of rail cars. Hadn't developed to the point where they needed an ore car in there yet. It was all manual. Somebody was hoping for a big strike, and that's as far as they got, and probably the ore pinched out and then went on to do something else.
So all of this sort of begs another question. So it was a gold mine. So was there any gold? Did you and your club members ever find gold?
Well, it was kind of fun. Before there were, a lot of TV shows and certainly obviously no computer games and things that occupy kids after school these days or weekends, we'd go over to the mine, and there was a lot of tailing piles. They were really extensive, and it was fun to pick over the piles and look for gold. And in our imaginations, finding iron pyrites or fool's gold was almost as good as the real thing. So all the kids had collections in a shoebox or a cigar box of pretty samples of iron pyrites that you'd find, and we'd pretend that we had these collections of actual gold, although I doubt that was much actually in there. If you look at, or if you've seen some of those pictures of the early days in Grass Valley, there's one famous picture of Mill Street covered with pretty good sized rock from one of the mines that dumped their rock there to help cover up the mud on the street. And looks like half the population of Grass Valley is out in the street picking through the mine tailings, looking for some high grade that had gotten through the sorting process at the mine, and hoping to find some nuggets in there. So there was always a chance you could actually find something.
But you never actually found anything.
Not that I know of.
Okay.
And those samples disappeared somewhere between 8 years old and 74. They got left behind somewhere.
So what was the occurrence of 1974?
Oh, I'm at 74. My age 74.
Oh, 70. Oh,
All those decades went by, and childhood treasures got left behind.
yeah.
We did have one other mine that I was let my parents know about. It was on the other side of the ridge, on what is now still the Empire Mine, but on the slope that faces north. During the Cold War, my dad was thinking about trying to, since we were so close to Beale Air Force Base, he figured we're going to get hit with nuclear weapons. So I showed him this one cave. It went back in maybe 50 feet, but it had a small entrance, and then it opened up into a large room. And the family ended up turning it into our personal bomb shelter. We smoothed the floor out, and so you could put sleeping bags on the floor, figuring we could put enough supplies in there to last for a couple of weeks until the fallout radiation was low enough so we could come out and see what was left of California. So anyway, we had a rack in our garage where we kept canned foods and other supplies, and a couple of wheelbarrows. And we practiced once, of evacuating the house, putting all the supplies and water, jugs and that sort of thing in the wheelbarrows and wheeled them down the hill, did this mine, and then we were going to cover the entrance up and try to survive a Russian attack. Anyway, that mine shaft ended up getting covered up by the state parks when they bought the surface rights to what is now the Empire Mine Park. My dad offered to show the mine staff where some of these holes were in the interest of public safety. And much to my chagrin, a little tractor shows up and covered them all up with dirt. And I've been down there in years since, and those things, they did a good job of covering them up, because even with regular erosion, the holes are still buried and unavailable to go into. And the other thing that we had to watch out for in those days were air vents that the miners put in to improve the air circulation in the mines. And there's still a few of those around. I saw one that I remembered from many, many years ago. It's still in the Empire. It's still on the Empire Mine Park property. And what's dangerous about those is they built them by picking a spot underground, and the surveyors would tell them where to dig, and then they would dig straight up until they came to the surface, and that'd act like a chimney which would draw in fresh air and help relieve the foul air way back in the bowels of the mine. And what's bad about those is there's no tailings around the mouth of these shafts. If you're digging from the top down, you're taking the dirt out, the rock out, and throwing it around outside your hole, and then somebody walking by, not knowing it's there, will see this big mound of tailings and go, "Oop, there must be a shaft around here somewhere. Be careful." But the ones with the air vents, they dig from the ground, dig it from the bottom up, then they'd haul the mine rock out through a different shaft, and so there's really nothing. Maybe some 80-year-old barbed wire around the hole, but otherwise there's no warning to people that are walking their dogs or running around in the woods to know that shaft is still lurking there and can be hundreds of feet down. Some neighborhoods would use them as handy-dandy garbage disposal holes, and you could dump household garbage in there for decades and not fill it up. At least the neighbors would know that it was there. But those are still out there, and you got to watch for them. Remnants of our mining days.
My goodness, I had no idea. So the mines have closed now. It's been many years since they've had operation. What do you think is the lasting memory of those days, particularly for you and the boys your age back in the 50s? Was it a carefree time?
Yeah, it was really a wonderful time. Our world sort of circulated around. Union Hill School was there. a little grocery store where we could buy penny candy. There was a farmer named Marty Fellman who had a large orchard right there behind Union Hill School, went all the way up to the top of the ridge. It was subsequently eaten up by the expansion of Union Hill School, and then I forget when, maybe in the 70s or 80s, it was most of it was purchased by Weiss Brothers Nursery, where they run their wholesale operation out of it. So it's all the pear trees are basically gone, but that was a point of a lot of fun. We would have pear fights out there when the pears were ripe. There was not used commercially because all the pears in Nevada County were struck by I think it might have been a virus or a mold during the 20s and 30s that made the pears unsaleable. So they were just pretty kind of abandoned out there. And we all built coasters. Union Hill Drive, which goes up behind Union Hill School, had a perfect slope for racing coasters down there. So those were and there was fish, mainly little catfish, in a branch of Wolf Creek that runs up through that part of Union Hill area. And we would go down there and fish for those, and never ate them, thank God, because it probably totally contaminated with mercury from the mining remnants. But there was always something to do, usually outdoors.
Well, one thing that occurs to me, you've alluded to the fact that you would perhaps borrow things from parents. So how much of all of this did the parents ever know? And as an adult, did you ever confess to knowing about the caves and your conduct there?
Oh, yeah. I came clean years ago, and at weak moments I'd tell another story to my mom, and she'd have some jaw-dropping moments, but it was kind of fun. We would just laugh about it at that point. She knew we were up to stuff, but probably, like some parents, maybe didn't even want to know, as long as we came back with all of our fingers and toes at the end of the day.
So you would always get back home before dark, and
like that.
All was well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think your parents owned a furniture store in Grass Valley for many years.
Yeah, Hedman Furniture. We bought the old Grass Valley furniture in 1956 and renamed it. My dad had a furniture store. My parents had a furniture store down in the San Joaquin Valley before we moved to Grass Valley, and so he had a lot of experience in the furniture business. So the closest other furniture store a real furniture store was in Auburn. In those days, the road from Auburn to Grass Valley was like 2 lanes, and a few places probably like 1.5 lanes, and it was lucky to be doing 35 or 40 miles an hour on it. And so we kind of had the market to ourselves pretty much.
Yeah, interesting. So your parents learned of some of this conduct later on in life. I bet your mom was amused at some of the stories, and it's always interesting to me is how we can actually grow up and survive some of the uncautious activities that we did. And you being able to be here where the mines are was a real added treasure for the young people of town. But as your parents were responsible citizens of the community, I suspect that they leaned on you to conduct yourself wisely, not to bring a bad sign to reputation to the furniture business.
Yeah, there was that kind of pressure, I would say, it was a small town. Most everybody knew what everybody else was up to, and it was like you hear about small towns anywhere during that period. Oftentimes you might do something borderline, and it'd be more like, rather than being in real trouble, the police would take you home, and you'd get a scolding, and that was about the end of it. And as long as you didn't turn it into a lifetime of crime, you're written off as just boys will be boys. So
boys will be boys.
I got a good example of that. Was the house we lived in Union Hill happened to be the air raid warden's house during World War II. And when we bought the house, it still had blackout curtains on all the windows, for example. And on our garage was a large, electrically driven siren to warn the neighborhood if the Japanese were going to bomb Union Hill, I guess. Well, sometimes when my parents would be gone for a while, neighborhood kids would get together and we'd flip the switch and fire the siren, which you could hear for miles in all directions. Not for very long, mind you, just for a short, brief period. One time, turned it on, and right at that moment, the highway patrolman was driving by our house on Highway 174. So he pulled in our driveway, and he came back later when my parents were home, and the siren got removed and it was donated to the Ophir Hill Fire Department to put on their new firehouse, which was being built right next door.
Very good. So it came to some good use, yeah. So all of this wonderful life as a youth in Grass Valley, growing up around the mines, somewhere came to an end because you left Grass Valley. When did you leave and where did you go from here?
Well, it was 1967, and after spending a year commuting to Sierra College in Rockland, there wasn't a Grass Valley campus in those days. Went on to Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, spent 4 years there, or 3.5, and I was during the Vietnam War, so I tried to milk my college deferment for as long as I could, but I got a bad number in the draft lottery, so signed up to be going to officer candidate school for the Navy, which turned out to be really a wonderful experience for a small town guy, and spent almost 4 years in the Navy and mainly on an aircraft carrier off the coast of Vietnam and up and down the Pacific coast. And that was a wonderful experience.
One day, you're a member of the 49er Rotary Club, and you did what we call a career talk, and your topic was a man with many hats. I don't know whether you can quickly run through that variety of hats you've worn over the years.
Oh golly, I'd have to write them all down. But I remember I had a booster's hat for the NU athletic program. So I went to high school at NU and played 3 sports in those days. Then I had a couple of hats from our fraternity down at Cal. It was the Delta Tau fraternity, and then a Cal Poly hat. A couple of Navy hats. I think one was my regular officer's hat, and then another one was like a flight helmet that I'd wear when we used to fly into Thailand. Part of my job included going to Thailand on a regular basis, bringing stuff back to the ship. And I had a hard hat when I was working for the Forest Service as a summer job in their engineering department, building logging roads in the late 60s. And I don't remember what other hats I wore after that and during that talk at Rotary, but I remember I had a whole box full of them, and you got a chuckle out of that. Yeah,
it was very fun. Well, Hilary, this has been a fabulous conversation. The treasures of Earth are holes in the ground in Nevada County. You're a guy who has great stories about that. So thanks for being with me this morning. And this is Talking with Gil Mathew here at NC Media. And Hilary, a couple of days before New Year's, I wish you and your family a very happy New Year.
Thank you, Gil. This has been fun.